The green plastic chair in the doctor's waiting room was stiff and cold, as if to remind me of this unpleasant reality. The pungent smell of disinfectant blended with the musty odor of old magazines scattered across the table. Around me were pale faces, dry coughs, and labored breaths. I sat there, trying to breathe evenly, trying to keep my mind from wandering back to the empty house since Arthur left. The phone suddenly rang, dry and piercing, shattering the quiet atmosphere. I flinched, my hand trembling as I looked at the screen. Claire. A flicker of warmth seeped into my chilled chest, but it was quickly extinguished. Mother. Her voice, no, asterisk, her Times voice, cut into my ear like an icy blade, cold, distant, devoid of any familial warmth. It wasn't the voice of the daughter I had cherished and cared for 45 years. Instead, it was a businesslike, emotionless voice, as if announcing a financial transaction. We're going to Europe tomorrow. Every word she uttered was heavy as lead, pressing down on my chest. I've sold your beach house, and the car too. We need the money. Goodbye. And she hung up. Asterisk, goodbye, asterisk. Those last two words were like a brutal kick, sending me reeling into a chasm of shock and pain. No explanation, no questions about my well-being. Not a moment of hesitation, just a cold, definitive announcement, followed by a deadly silence. I still held the phone to my ear, even after the dial tone began to drone. Had I misheard? Was this just a terrible dream? A cruel joke? But no, the chill running down my spine, the bitter lump in my throat, and the numb emptiness in my chest, it was all real. 45 long years. 45 years of unconditional love, of silent sacrifices. Every drop of sweat, every restless night worrying about her. I had once thought myself the luckiest mother in the world to have such a well-behaved, dutiful daughter. Especially after Arthur passed, she visited frequently, helping me with everything, with that loving smile I believed to be genuine. Now, with each fresh cut to my heart, I realized it was merely a smile of calculation, of exploitation. The beach house. It wasn't just a house. It was a sacred home, where Arthur and I had built countless memories, from Claire's tiny birthday parties to Christmas evenings gathered by the fireplace. Every corner, every brick, was imbued with our sweat and love. Arthur had personally built the small wooden pier out to sea. I had tended the vibrant rose garden. Claire grew up there, brought her friends there, and later her husband. It was a part of my soul, a legacy of love. And she, my daughter, had sold it, like selling an old worthless item. Even the old pickup truck that Arthur treasured like his own eye. He washed it every Sunday, changed the oil regularly, always parked it under the familiar tree. His familiar scent still lingered on the seats. It was the last thing I had left of him, a small, remaining piece of the man I loved. Claire knew that. She knew what that car meant to me. Yet she sold it, without a word, without a moment's hesitation. A numbing shock and pain spread throughout my body. I felt as if I had been discarded, torn into pieces. 45 years of motherhood, and I was dismissed with a cold phone call, left stranded and alone in a hospital waiting room, among strangers. My heart felt squeezed, yet not a single tear could fall. Only a gaping, cold void remained, an emptiness nothing could fill. Claire had not only taken my possessions, she had stolen the last vestiges of a mother's faith and hope. The phone rang again, sharp and jarring, piercing the heavy, dim air of the doctor's waiting room. A shrill sound from my old handbag pulled me from the nebulous thoughts of illness and loneliness that surrounded me. I fumbled, taking out the phone. Claire, my only daughter. Just seeing her name made my chest tighten. A natural reflex of a mother's heart, now perpetually anxious. Mother, I'm going to Europe tomorrow. Claire's voice echoed, strangely cold and distant, as if she were speaking to a stranger, not the woman who had carried her, given birth to her, and raised her for 45 years. I've sold the beach house and your car. We need money. Goodbye for now. And she hung up, a long, chilling beep, like a death knell for a relationship just buried. I remained seated on the uncomfortable green plastic chair, surrounded by the tired, haggard faces of other patients. Claire's words reverberated in my head, like sharp blades cutting into my heart. 45 years. 45 years I had raised her, sacrificed everything for her, from sleepless nights when she had a fever to dreams I set aside for her future. And now she discarded me like an old item, without a hint of regret, without an explanation. My insides twisted, but strangely, not a single tear rolled down. For months, since Arthur's passing, tears had been my constant companion, flowing uncontrollably. Yet now, my eyes were dry. Instead, a strange sensation welled up within me. It wasn't sadness, nor was it anger. It was an eerie stillness, a peace I hadn't felt since Arthur's permanent departure. This stillness permeated every muscle, every vein, soothing the agonizing pain in my chest. It was like a calm lake after a storm, reflecting an endlessly blue sky. Not a ripple, not a sound. And then, amidst that stillness, a memory suddenly returned, clear in every detail, as if it had happened just yesterday. 3 days before Arthur died, the day we still sat together for breakfast, chatting about trivial things in life, he placed a large yellow manila envelope, the kind used for business, into my hand. "Antonia." His voice was warm and deep, his eyes holding something profound I couldn't understand at the time. "Put this in your wardrobe drawer. If anything happens to me, then after some time, when you feel ready, open it." I took it, not thinking much of it. At the time, I just thought it was insurance papers or a standard will, and I put it in the drawer, exactly as Arthur instructed. After the funeral, with so much grief and so many worries, I had completely forgotten its existence. But now, it returned to my mind, brilliant and clear like a searchlight illuminating the night. That envelope. It was still there, patiently waiting for me at home. A sudden ray of light pierced the desperate darkness, carrying a promise, a secret Arthur had entrusted to me. Perhaps my dear daughter Claire didn't know that my life held more than she saw. And I, Eleanor Vance, 71 years old this year, felt a strange urge, a fresh determination surging through my veins. That envelope, destiny had arranged for it to wait for me. And now, I was ready. Ready to open it, ready to face whatever was inside, and ready to rewrite my own story. My steps were heavy as I crossed the threshold, feeling the weight of a long day and the subtle change within me. The house greeted me with its familiar silence, a silence that was no longer frightening, but held a secret waiting to be revealed. I didn't bother turning on the lights, letting the twilight filter through the window, painting long, familiar shadows, no longer as ominous as before. I walked straight into the bedroom, the room Arthur and I had shared for so many years. The old oak dresser stood there, silently witnessing all our ups and downs. I opened the familiar drawer, where I usually kept small mementos, and there it lay, the tan manila envelope, exactly where I had placed it 3 days before Arthur's departure. It had patiently waited, hidden beneath a thin sheet, waiting for this precise moment. My fingers trembled as they touched the envelope, feeling its thickness and the heavy contents within. Arthur had written my name on the front in his neat, familiar handwriting. Just seeing his script made my heart catch. I sat down on the edge of the bed where we had shared covers for nearly half a century, and took a deep breath. The air in the room was thick, carrying the scent of old wood, the scent of time and of an eternal love. Outside, darkness gradually fell, swallowing the last rays of sunlight, and I knew a new chapter in my life was about to begin. I slowly tore open the edge of the envelope, deliberately, carefully, as if unwrapping a long-forgotten birthday present, a gift I never knew I craved so much. Inside, it wasn't just 1 or 2 sheets of paper, but a thick stack of documents. My eyes scanned the words, the numbers, the legal terms I had never had to bother with, land titles, property deeds, bank passbooks with figures that made my head spin. I was stunned. My hands trembled violently, causing a few papers to fall to the floor. Then I saw the letter, in Arthur's familiar handwriting. My heart tightened once more, but not from the pain of loss, but from a dizzying astonishment and an overwhelming, breathless surge of love. "My dearest Antonia." The opening line was like a warm embrace from afar. Tears suddenly welled up, rolling down my cheeks, salty. He explained that he had invested all our savings in real estate and other businesses. He said we didn't just have the house on the beach. We had 6 other properties, including the apartment building where Claire and Marcus lived. We also had shares in 3 companies whose value far exceeded my imagination. "You are very wealthy, my love," he wrote. "You have always been wealthy, but now you are also wealthy on paper." I nearly collapsed. My Arthur, my gentle, simple bus driver husband. He had quietly amassed this enormous fortune without a word. A slight reproach crept into my heart. "Why did you keep this a secret, my Arthur? Didn't you trust me?" But then I read on. His words explaining that he wanted to protect me from worries, and more importantly, he didn't want Claire to know about our true financial situation. "You know, our daughter Antonia, if she knew we had so much money, her attitude would change. I wanted her to love us for who we are, not for what we have." His explanation made me sob uncontrollably. Tears of astonishment, of boundless love for the man who had silently provided for me even after his passing, and a choking feeling at the irony of fate. Claire had sold our beach house, sold Arthur's truck, treated me as a burden just to seek opportunity in Europe. She had thought she was leaving me with nothing, while in reality, I was sitting on a fortune. My Arthur, he had always been far-sighted, had always loved and protected me in his own way. And now, this great secret was not just a gift, but a shield, a weapon I never thought I would possess. Claire's so-called abandonment, now, was precisely the beginning of a plan Arthur had set in motion, a plan I would complete for him. Claire called me again, on a bright morning as I sat drinking coffee in the kitchen, trying to sort through my jumbled thoughts. Her voice this time sounded completely different, no longer cold and emotionless as it had been in the doctor's waiting room. A little sweeter, seemingly more concerned, but after everything that had happened, I had learned to be wary of any change in her tone. "Mother, how are you?" she asked, sounding like a casual inquiry, but I knew it held another meaning. "I wanted to let you know that we've transferred the money from the house and car sale. I sent your share to your account. It's not much, but it should help you live for a few months while you find a smaller place." My share? These 3 words echoed in my head, carrying a wave of bitterness. "My share?" I asked back, trying to keep my voice calm, not betraying any emotion. "Yes, Mother. We obviously wouldn't leave you with nothing. We've given you 30%. That's fair, isn't it? We need the money for our investment in Europe. Marcus has a fantastic business opportunity there. 30% of times what was rightfully mine asterisk. 30% of the money from the house Arthur and I had worked so hard to buy, from the truck he cared for like his own child. Marcus had a fantastic business opportunity? How ridiculous! How biased! I thought to myself, a wry smile briefly appearing on my lips. I took a deep breath, suppressing the rising indignation. "Oh, my dear, so when are you leaving?" I continued to play the role of the simple, weak mother, as she always believed me to be. "This afternoon. Our luggage is all packed. We'll be gone for at least 6 months, maybe longer if the business goes well. But don't worry, Mother. When we come back, we'll help you find a small apartment. Something suitable for your needs." Suitable for my needs. As if she knew what my needs were, as if she had ever truly cared about my needs. "All right, Claire. Have a safe journey," I said, my voice still even. "Oh, Mother, I knew you'd understand. You're always so kind. We love you so much." And she hung up with a click, as if eager to escape an unpleasant obligation. I remained standing there, phone still to my ear, feeling the coldness of the plastic casing. And then, something strange happened. For the first time in months, I didn't cry. Instead, a laugh escaped my throat, a dry, humorless laugh, not of joy, but of the utterly ridiculous irony of the situation. My daughter had dispossessed me, pushed me out of my own home, spoken to me with an unbearable tone of condescension, all to fund a European adventure that would most likely be a disaster. But what pained me most wasn't the money. It was the ease with which she had cast me aside. 45 years of my life dedicated to her, sacrificed for her, loved unconditionally, and she had erased me from her life with a 2-minute phone call. That was what truly hurt. I checked my online bank account. As expected, they had deposited an amount that was perhaps generous to them but a mockery to me. They had sold the beach house for far less than its real value, likely because they needed quick cash, and they had sold Arthur's truck for a paltry sum. I knew I wasn't supposed to sell that house, because I was the legal owner. She had fabricated a story about my illness to justify her actions, exploiting my feigned weakness for her own purposes. That afternoon, from the window, I watched Claire and Marcus load their suitcases into a taxi. Marcus carried 2 enormous suitcases. Claire held a very expensive-looking handbag. I watched them laugh and talk, kiss each other, and outline their plans. They looked like 2 eager children embarking on an adventure. They never looked towards my window, never said goodbye. As the taxi drove off, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, and Arthur's documents spread out on the table. I needed to make some decisions. I could call a lawyer, demand my property back, and reclaim everything they had taken. But something told me there was a better way to handle this, a more educational way. I called Mr. Harrison, the lawyer who had handled Arthur's affairs. He had attended the funeral, offered his condolences, and told me to call if I needed anything. Yes, now I needed him. "Mrs. Brooks, good to hear from you. How are you?" he asked. "I'm well, Mr. Harrison. I need to see you urgently. I found some documents of Arthur's that I don't quite understand. Of course, you can come to my office tomorrow morning. I'll be there." That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. I dreamed of Arthur. He was sitting in his favorite chair reading the newspaper, just like every morning. And when he saw me, he smiled and said, "It's time, my love. It's time for you to stand up for yourself." I woke with a strange feeling. It wasn't exactly happiness, but neither was it the sadness I had felt for months. It was something akin to determination. For the first time since Arthur's death, I had a clear purpose. I would reclaim what was mine, but not in the way Claire expected. The next morning, I dressed more carefully than usual. I wore the burgundy dress, the one Arthur always said made me look elegant. I combed my hair and put on a little makeup, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I hadn't seen in a very long time. I saw a strong woman. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling slightly on the old telephone keypad. This was an important step, the first move on the chessboard I was about to set. "Mr. Harrison, this is Eleanor Vance." "Yes, that's right. Mrs. Brooks. I hope I'm not disturbing you." My voice sounded calmer than I expected, as if another woman were speaking through my throat. "It seems I'm in a situation that requires a very good lawyer, Mr. Harrison." The next morning I woke with a strange feeling. It wasn't an explosive joy, nor the lingering sadness I had carried for months. It was a sense of resolve, a cold but strong current coursing through every fiber of my being. For the first time since Arthur's death, I had a clear purpose. I would reclaim what was mine, but not in the way Claire expected. I chose a Bordeaux-colored dress, the one Arthur always said I looked elegant in. I neatly tied my hair into a simple bun, applied a touch of light lipstick, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I hadn't seen in a very long time. I saw a strong woman. Mr. Harrison's office was downtown, in an old but elegant building with cool marble floors beneath my feet and large windows overlooking the bustling street. Mr. Harrison greeted me with his usual warm smile, but that smile faded when he held the stack of documents I handed him. Arthur's papers, now neatly organized in a dark blue folder. "Mrs. Brooks, this is more than I imagined," he murmured, his spectacles sliding down his nose. He had handled Arthur's affairs before. He knew Arthur wasn't a wealthy man, or at least, he thought so. Arthur was indeed an incredibly intelligent man, and was an apt elf. Mr. Harrison turned each page, occasionally letting out a soft whistle. I sat there calmly, observing his expression change from surprise to astonishment. Everything was real. The buildings, the bank accounts, the investments Arthur had quietly built over 40 years. We didn't just have the beach house. We had 6 other properties, including the apartment building where Claire and Marcus lived. We had shares in 3 companies worth more than anyone could imagine. I was wealthy. I had always been wealthy, but now I truly realized it. "Everything is legal, Mrs. Brooks," Mr. Harrison said, his voice now filled with admiration. "The documents are valid. You are the rightful owner of all these assets." Then he confirmed what I had suspected. And the sale of that beach house was illegal. Claire had absolutely no right to sell it. "We can reclaim the house immediately, and even sue your daughter for fraud." For a moment, just a moment, I pictured Claire standing in the dock, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. But I quickly dismissed the thought. No, that wasn't the path I wanted to take. Arthur had spent his life concealing this wealth, not for it to become a weapon in a legal battle. "No, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice unexpectedly firm. "I don't want to sue. I want to do this another way." a more educational way. Mr. Harrison looked at me curiously, but then he nodded. Of course, you are my client. What do you need? I need you to discreetly reclaim the beach house. Do whatever is necessary to invalidate that fraudulent transaction. And I need you to help me gain real control over all my assets, especially the apartment building where my daughter is living. He was silent for a moment, thinking, I understand. This will be a process that takes a few weeks, but it is entirely feasible. Excellent. And Mr. Harrison, I don't want anyone to know I'm behind all this, at least not yet. As I left the office, I felt as if I had just woken from a very long dream. I walked along the bustling streets of downtown, watching the people pass by, the tall buildings, life going on as usual. But for me, everything had changed. I had a plan. A chess game had begun, and I, Eleanor Vance, held all the key pieces in my hand. In the weeks that followed, my life was like a silent play divided into two completely contrasting acts. On the outside, I was Eleanor Vance, the pitiable 7-1-year-old widow who had just lost her husband and been mercilessly abandoned by her only daughter. My silver hair was neatly pinned, my eyes often wore a pensive expression, a skill honed by 45 years of motherhood, and my steps were slow whenever I left the house. That was the image I wanted the world to see. But deep inside, I was a completely different woman, sharp, resolute, and silently orchestrating a plan for revenge, or rather, a valuable lesson for my beloved daughter. I still lived in my familiar home, sat at the kitchen table where Arthur and I had shared countless breakfasts, but my mind no longer lingered on old pains. It was now a functioning machine, calculating each step, each strategic move with my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. Every morning, when I watered the plants in the garden or walked around the neighborhood to stay fit, pitying and curious glances turned my way. Neighbors, people who had known me my whole life, spoke to me in the gentle, empathetic tone reserved for unfortunate souls. Mrs. Gable, my oldest neighbor, came by the bougainvillea fence one afternoon, looking at me with eyes full of concern. My dear Antonia, is it true that Claire went to Europe and left you all alone? Her voice was soft, as if afraid of breaking something fragile within me. I nodded, my face showing a well-practiced sadness. Yes, Gable. She went with Marcus. They have business there. How will you manage, Antonia? Everyone knows Arthur didn't leave much money. Asterisk. If only you knew. Asterisk, I thought to myself. But on the outside, it was still a patient smile. Don't worry, Gable. I'll be fine. Thank you for your concern. Mrs. Gable sighed again, her eyes a mix of pity and a hint of relief that this tragedy hadn't befallen her. It was a familiar look I had received often since Arthur's funeral. I smiled, nodded my thanks, and continued my performance. The butcher, the bakery owner, the grocer on the corner, everyone spoke to me in that tone, the tone of those comforting the unfortunate. And I continued to smile, nod, and thank them for their concern. Inside, a part of me almost enjoyed this play. It was like living a double life. But that play sometimes touched old wounds, making them ache, especially when I decided to revisit the beach house. I took the bus, following the familiar coastal road that Arthur and I had driven hundreds of times. The small, cream-colored house, with its porch overlooking the sea, was just as it had always been. The new owners had added a few potted plants on the doorstep, but otherwise, everything was intact. I sat on the curb opposite, watching it for an hour. Memories flooded back like the tide. Summer afternoons when Claire was tiny, running on the beach, building sandcastles. Arthur grilling fish on the barbecue while I prepared salad in the kitchen. Claire bringing her friends, then boyfriends, then Marcus. All those happy moments, she had turned them into a mere commercial transaction. An old man came out of the house. He saw me sitting there, his eyes curious. "Are you all right, ma'am?" "Yes, I'm fine. Just reminiscing. I used to know the previous owners." "Ah, yes, us too. It's a shame what happened. They told us the older woman was very ill and needed to sell quickly. We thought it was a bargain, but it turns out the transaction wasn't legal. We had to return the house." That remark hit me like a splash of cold water. Asterisk. The older woman was very ill. Asterisk. They told us her daughter handled everything because the mother couldn't. My heart felt squeezed. I knew Claire would sell the house. would lie about needing money, but I never imagined she would fabricate a story about my illness. A bitter taste spread in my throat. Not because of the money, but because of the ease with which she had slandered me, turning me into a sick, pitiable, incapable person to justify her actions. To Claire, I was no longer a mother with feelings, but merely an obstacle to be removed. I left there with a heavy heart. The pain wasn't just a material loss. The greater pain was betrayal. Claire had treated me like an old item, a burden, an excuse to achieve her goals. But at that very moment, a cold fire ignited within me. It wasn't blind anger, but an iron will. Claire would have to learn the lesson I had spent my life teaching her. Leaving Mr. Harrison's law office, I held in my hands the heavy folders containing the power over everything Arthur had secretly built. They were the clearest proof that I was not a poor, pitiable widow, as Claire still believed. I was the owner of valuable properties, of substantial bank accounts, and especially the owner of the very apartment building where my daughter was living. But heavier than those papers was an invisible burden pressing on my chest, the burden of a decision. I returned home, the familiar house that had witnessed so much happiness and pain. I leaned back into the old armchair in the living room where Arthur used to sit reading the newspaper every morning. The evening light streamed through the window, painting the room in a quiet, golden hue. In that stillness, my heart stirred. That apartment, it was mine now. The luxurious apartment where Claire and Marcus had lived, the apartment Marcus had used as collateral for debt, was now legally mine. The mother's heart within me bled at the thought of what to do next. Claire was my daughter, the flesh and blood I had carried, given birth to, and spent my life raising. That love, though covered by disappointment and pain, would never die. But then, the image of Claire's cold smile, her emotionless voice over the phone. "Mother, we need money. I've sold your beach house and your car. Goodbye." The way she hung up, the way she stripped away everything Arthur and I had built, the way she treated me like an old, useless item. 45 years of sacrifice, 45 years of unconditional love, discarded by her in a 2-minute phone call. No tears fell. Instead, an icy stream flowed through every fiber of my being, from my heart spreading throughout my body. It was a firmness, a determination I hadn't felt since Arthur's death. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't petty revenge. This was a valuable lesson, a lesson Claire needed to learn to become a proper human being. She needed to feel the sense of loss, the feeling of being stripped away, of being discarded, that I had experienced. I picked up the phone. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of this decision. I dialed Mr. Harrison's number. He answered after the second ring. "Mrs. Brooks, is something wrong?" My voice was firm, without a trace of hesitation. "Mr. Harrison, I want you to send an eviction notice to Claire's apartment." Silence on the other end of the line, a prolonged, surprised silence. I could imagine Mr. Harrison's face, his eyebrows raised, his eyes narrowed in bewilderment. "Mrs. Brooks," he asked cautiously, "are you sure about this? She is your daughter, after all." "Absolutely," I replied, my voice still calm but containing unwavering resolve. "She decided I wasn't important in her life. Now she will learn just how important I am." Mr. Harrison sighed softly. "I understand, Mrs. Brooks. I will do what is necessary. How much time shall we give her?" 30 days, I said. "According to legal standard." After hanging up, I sat silently in the room, bathed in twilight. It wasn't a feeling of relief, but a strange sensation, a mix of a mother's hidden pain and the peace of a decision made. I believed Arthur would understand. He was always far-sighted, and he also understood better than anyone that sometimes love needed to be shown in ways that were not easy. I had sown the first seeds for Claire's lesson, and I knew this was just the beginning. I was sipping my morning tea, gazing at the small garden outside the window, when the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't the jarring sound of the call from the doctor's office, but an old tune I had chosen for Claire when she was a little girl. My heart tightened, not from fear, but from a cold premonition. I knew this would be another call. A new chapter in the bitter play we were enacting. Mother, I need to talk to you urgently." Claire's voice was broken, devoid of the cold, distant demeanor of previous weeks. It was hurried, hoarse, as if she were being chased. I gripped the receiver, suppressing a smirk. "Good morning, my dear. "How was your trip to Europe?" I asked, my voice as casual as possible, though internally, a part of me was relishing this downfall. "Mother, I don't have time for that right now. I just received a very strange letter. It says I have to move out of the apartment in 30 days. It must be a mistake, right? Do you know anything about this?" She began to gush, without a pause. I ignored the question about the letter, opting instead for what I truly wanted to hear. "Eviction notice? How strange. Who is it from, dear?" And then, what I had been waiting for arrived. "Marcus abandoned me in Europe, Mother. He ran off with another woman, and now, I'm back here and this happens. I don't understand what's going on anymore." Her voice choked, a sob escaping. Marcus had abandoned her, just as predicted. That greedy, deceitful man had discarded Claire as soon as the money ran out, or when financial problems back home became too great. What a perfect irony. Claire had sacrificed family, rejected me for a worthless man, and now she was tasting the bitter flavor of betrayal herself. "I'm so sorry, my dear. Where are you now?" I asked, maintaining a worried expression but with a heart as still as a rippleless lake. "I'm at the apartment, but I don't know how long I can stay." "Mother, can I come see you? I need to talk to someone. I have no one else left." The phrase "I have no one else left" echoed in my ears. How ridiculous. Now, when all the glitter had crumbled, when the man she had placed all her trust in had abandoned her, she remembered she had a mother she had once discarded mercilessly, treated as a burden. "Of course, my dear. Come whenever you want. I'm home," I said softly, then hung up the phone. I walked to the old mirror in the living room, looking directly at my reflection. My hair had turned gray, deep wrinkles etched around my eyes, but in those eyes, there was no longer sadness or emptiness. Instead, there was a steady resolve, tinged with cunning. I needed to be perfect for this performance. I chose the simplest gray dress, tied my hair neatly. I practiced the expression of a worried mother, yet also one full of resignation. When Claire arrived, she would see exactly the woman she expected, a pitiful, weak widow, abandoned by her own daughter. An hour later, a faint knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, I was stunned by Claire's appearance. She was gaunt, deep shadows under her eyes, and her expensive clothes were now wrinkled and disheveled. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Mother," she uttered, and for a moment I thought she would rush into my arms, but then she stopped, as if suddenly remembering how everything had ended between us. "Come in, my dear. Would you like some coffee?" I asked gently, leading her into the house. We sat down at the kitchen table, where I had read Arthur's documents just weeks earlier. Claire looked so small on that chair, lost, just like when she was a child coming to tell me about her troubles at school. "Mother, I'm sorry for how I left. I know I didn't treat you well." Her voice trembled, full of remorse. "It's all in the past, my dear," I said, but inside the cuts were still there, sharp. "No, it's not, Mother. I treated you terribly. I said horrible things, and now—" Her voice choked, then broke into a sob. "Now I have no one." She recounted everything. Marcus had run off with a 25-year-old hotel waitress in Paris. There was no business venture in Europe. It was all a lie for him to escape his huge debts here and to use the money from my house sale for his adventure. She said Marcus had borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars, using their apartment as collateral, and had even forged Claire's signature. "I don't know what to do, Mother. I have no money. I have no job. I have nowhere to live." She sobbed uncontrollably, truly desperate tears, and for a moment the mother's heart in me softened. I wanted to hug her, comfort her, tell her everything would be all right. But then I remembered her cold voice when she called me from the clinic, the way she discarded me as easily as an old item, the way she spoke to me as if I were a burden. "Have you spoken to a lawyer about that letter?" I asked, my voice still calm. "I don't have money for a lawyer, Mother. We spent all our money in Europe. Marcus took what little was left when he ran off. So what do you plan to do?" "I don't know. I thought maybe I could stay with you for a while, until I find a job and can rent a small place to live." And here it was, the question I had been waiting for. After kicking me out of my own home, after selling everything I had, after treating me like trash, now she wanted me to save her. She wanted the pitiful widow she had created to save her from the consequences of her own actions. "Of course, my dear, this will always be your home," I said, and Claire looked at me with surprise. as if she hadn't expected it to be so easy. "Really, Mother? After everything that happened?" "You are my daughter, Claire. That will never change." She stood up, and this time she hugged me tightly. It was a desperate embrace of a drowning person clinging to the only thing they could find. I hugged her back, but not with the unconditional love of before. Now in my embrace there was calculation. There was strategy. "Thank you, Mother. I promise I'll find a job soon. I won't bother you. Don't worry about that now. Rest, recover, and then look at your options." Claire left that afternoon to get a few remaining things from her apartment. I sat back in the kitchen, thinking about the ease of it all. She had returned to me just as I had anticipated, broken, desperate, with no other options, and best of all, she suspected nothing. To her, I was still the pitiful, abandoned mother who needed her sympathy. But this was only the first part of my plan. Letting her live with me would give me the perfect opportunity for the next phase. I would let her settle in, feel safe, and believe she had found a refuge in my home. And then, when she least expected it, I would teach her the difference between poverty by choice and poverty by consequence. That night, I called Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, I need you to do something else for me." "Yes, Mrs. Brooks?" "I want you to investigate Marcus' debts. I want to know exactly who he owes, how much, and what legal options I have to separate them from my daughter. That will take time, but it's entirely feasible." "Perfect. And Mr. Harrison, I want you to keep this absolutely confidential. No one is to know I am behind this investigation." "Of course, Mrs. Brooks. May I ask what your ultimate plan is?" "My plan, Mr. Harrison, is simple. I will save my daughter, but first, she must truly understand what it means to hit rock bottom." As I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine Arthur had saved for special occasions. It had been a long time since I had such a special occasion. The game had begun, and for the first time in months, I held all the best cards. Claire moved back into my house the next day, bringing 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, all that remained of her former luxurious life. I quietly watched her arrange her belongings in her old room, the room she used to sleep in as a teenager, and recognized the humiliation in every gesture. From a luxurious condominium, she now had to seek refuge in her childhood room, where teenage memories still lingered with the scent of perfume and old magazines. One afternoon, as I was watering plants in the garden, Claire unexpectedly approached me, holding a manila envelope. "Mother, I found this in the apartment," she said, her voice slightly hesitant. "It was mixed in with Marcus things. It has your name on it." My heart tightened, a jolt running down my spine. A second envelope. "Arthur, he always knew everything. My name?" "How strange," I said, keeping my voice calm, though inside a silent smile for Arthur blossomed on my lips. "Yes, Mother, look." She held out the envelope. Indeed, on it was Arthur's neat, familiar handwriting, addressing me. But this envelope was smaller, newer than the one I found in the drawer. Claire continued, "Perhaps Marcus found it in Dad's things when he passed and forgot to give it to you." I nodded. "That's possible. Do you want to see what's inside?" she asked, a faint glimmer of hope in her eyes. It was the hope of a drowning person clinging to anything floating on the surface. I opened the envelope right in front of her. Inside was a short letter and a small key. The letter read, "Antonia, if you read this after receiving the main envelope, it means our daughter is going through a difficult time. This key opens a safe deposit box at the Central Bank branch in the business district. The box number is 247. There is something there that can help you help her, but use it wisely. With eternal love, Arthur." Claire read the letter over my shoulder. A safe deposit box? Dad had a safe deposit box? I had no idea. I feigned surprise. "Neither did I, my dear. Your father never told me about this." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing aloud. "Arthur, he was truly a genius." "Do you think we should go see what's in it?" Claire asked, her desperation evident in her voice. That evening, Claire and I had dinner together for the first time in months. She had tried to cook, as if to prove herself useful, but the food tasted strongly of guilt and despair. She told me more details about what had happened in Europe, and each story was worse than the last. "Marcus lied about everything, Mother, not just the business, but the debts too. I thought he only owed a little money, but it turns out he owed over $100,000. And worse, he used my name for some loans I knew nothing about. How could you not know? I asked, though I already had the answer. He forged my signature. When I married him, I gave him some papers to handle bank matters for our joint account. I never thought he would use them for this. Claire began to sob uncontrollably. How could I be so stupid? How could I not realize what kind of person he was? Love can sometimes make people blind, my dear. Don't blame yourself, I said, though internally I felt a flicker of satisfaction. She was experiencing exactly what I had felt when Marcus abandoned me, betrayal from someone I had trusted completely. But Mother, I didn't just ruin my own life. I ruined yours too. I treated you terribly. I took away your house, your truck, your things, and all of it just to fund a useless man who abandoned me at the first opportunity. Now we are two poor women trying to survive because of me. If only she knew, I thought. That right now I had more money than she could imagine, that I owned the building where she used to live, that I could solve all her problems with a single phone call. But it wasn't time yet. She needed to hit rock bottom completely. The next day, we went to the bank. Claire was both anxious and full of hope. As for me, I maintained the image of a bewildered widow, not very financially savvy. The bank teller led us to the safe deposit box area, verified my identity, and opened box number 247. Inside were sparkling jewels, a great many, rings, necklaces, bracelets, earrings. I recognized a few items as family heirlooms from Arthur's side, pieces I had seen him carefully store in his grandmother's box. Others were completely new to me, glittering under the bank lights. Along with them was a letter explaining the origin of each piece and their estimated value. Claire gasped. Mother, this must be worth a fortune. Do you think so? I feigned surprise. Yes, look at the emerald on this pearl necklace. Mother, Dad kept a treasure here. According to Arthur's letter, the jewelry was worth about $200,000. It was a significant sum, but nothing compared to the rest of my assets. It was like finding a few loose coins under the sofa when you have millions in the bank. What are we going to do with this, Mother? Claire asked, her voice trembling. I had to bite my lip to avoid revealing the truth. I don't know, my dear. They are family heirlooms. But Mother, we could sell a few pieces. With this money, you could get the beach house back, and I could pay off some of Marcus' debts. Her eyes were still focused on Marcus. Clearly, she hadn't learned anything yet. I felt a deep sadness, but also a confirmation that my plan was necessary. Are you sure you want to use your father's inheritance to pay Marcus' debts? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. What other choice do I have, Mother? If I don't pay the debt soon, the bank will seize everything I own. And technically, I don't own anything. Everything is in Marcus' name. We brought the jewelry home. Claire spread it out on the kitchen table and examined each piece, calculating which ones could be sold and which could be kept. It was heartbreaking to watch her turn decades of family history into numbers on a spreadsheet. I realized this was a necessary part of the lesson she had to learn. She needed to feel the true cost of what she had traded away. She kept the engagement ring Arthur gave me and a small necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. Mother, I think I can sell this jewelry for $180,000, she said one afternoon, counting the bills on the kitchen table. Less than I expected, but enough to pay off the most urgent debts. Are you sure? I asked again, my voice a little bitter this time. I have no other choice. If I don't pay the debts soon, they'll seize everything. Even this house could be at risk if they can prove I have any legal connection to the assets. The irony. Claire was worried about losing a house I owned, paying off debts for a man who had abandoned her, with money from jewelry belonging to the very man who had built the fortune that could save her. And which debts will you decide to pay first? I talked to a free financial advisor at the bank. She advised me to prioritize secured debts, as those are the ones that can affect assets or lead to immediate foreclosure. Claire had matured a lot in the past few weeks. The woman who once sold my belongings without asking was now carefully considering every financial decision. Suffering had made her more responsible, but also more fragile. That evening, as she was organizing the debt papers on the table, I noticed a profound change in her eyes. Mother, I want you to know this, she said, her voice trembling, looking up at me. I've been thinking a lot about Dad, about how disappointed he would be in me if he could see what I've done with my life. Your father loved you very much, Claire. He would understand, I said, my heart aching to see her grapple with her guilty thoughts. No, Mother. Dad taught me to be responsible, to cherish family, not to be selfish. And I did the complete opposite. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I took everything Dad left behind. I treated you as if you were a burden. I destroyed everything Dad built. For the first time since she returned, I heard genuine remorse in her voice. It wasn't just complaining about the consequences of her actions, but a real acknowledgement that she had done something morally wrong. I knew this was the first sign that the lesson was slowly sinking in. Soon after, Mr. Harrison called me. "Mrs. Brooks, I have important news. We found Marcus." "Where?" I asked, my voice firm. "In Paris, just as your daughter suspected. But here's the interesting part. Has trying to obtain residency in France through a sham marriage to the young woman your daughter mentioned. The evidence shows he deliberately forged your daughter's documents with the intention of fleeing the country. That means Claire can be released from the debts." I smiled. Everything was going according to plan. "So, Mrs. Brooks, do you want us to begin the legal process immediately to free your daughter from Marcus' debts?" "Yes, Mr. Harrison, but don't tell my daughter anything. I want this process to be completely finished before I tell her. I don't want to give her false hope." Now I had all the good cards in my hand. The game had begun. She moved into my house with just 2 suitcases and a flimsy cardboard box, all that remained of the luxurious life she once had. I watched Claire fold her clothes into the closet in her old room, the room I had decorated with all the love and memories of a carefree childhood. Every movement she made exuded a sense of shame and extreme exhaustion. From a high-end apartment, she returned here, where the faded cartoon wallpaper and the old duvet I still kept remained. Each time I watched her walk into her old room, the room I had decorated with all the love and memories of a carefree childhood, I saw an invisible burden weighing on her shoulders. Selling the jewelry from Arthur's safe was a painful thing for me to witness. Claire was meticulous, from researching market prices to seeking potential buyers. My gut twisted each time she brought out the family heirlooms, the precious gems Arthur had accumulated throughout his life, and arranged them on the kitchen table. Each gem, each necklace carried a story, a moment of my family, but now they were just numbers on her spreadsheet. She needed money to pay her debts. She needed money to escape the mess Marcus had left behind. Though heartbreaking, a part of me quietly acknowledged this change in her. She no longer just spent or demanded, but began to learn how to face harsh reality. Then came the job search. Claire, with her degree and management experience, thought it would be easy to find a new job. But life wasn't as fair as she thought. Time after time, interviews ended with polite but cold rejections, accompanied by reasons like pending legal issues or unsuitable credit history. The blunt rejections from glossy offices were like salt rubbed into her pride. I sat in the kitchen, brewing myself a cup of tea, listening to her sighs from her room and feeling the despair slowly eroding her spirit. One evening, Claire came home with a different look on her face, a mix of exhaustion and something resembling resilience. "Mother, I went to 3 interviews today," she said, her voice hoarse. 2 places didn't hire me because of the legal troubles. The 3rd place, they hired me for night shifts, cleaning offices. Seeing my daughter, who was accustomed to high heels and elaborate lunches, now befriending a broom and a bucket of water, my mother's heart ached. I could imagine the pungent smell of bleach clinging to her hair and clothes every night. Seeing her swollen feet, her dark ringed eyes from exhaustion when she came home, I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. She had lost everything, and now she was working hard just to survive. But a colder rationality reminded me that this was the price she had to pay, a valuable lesson I hoped would change her forever. Gable, my old friend, was very perceptive. One afternoon she came over, sat in the kitchen drinking tea and looking at family photos on the wall. "Antonia," she said, her eyes stopping at a photo of Claire at 5 years old, smiling brightly on Arthur's lap, "I have a feeling Claire has changed a lot." I took a sip of tea, maintaining a calm expression. "Life, Gable. Everyone goes through ups and downs." "Not just ups and downs," Gable shook her head. "She's not as arrogant as before. She seems more humble, as if she's learned something important." I remained silent, letting Gable continue. She was speaking exactly what I felt. "What do you think she's learned?" I asked. "I think she's learned the value of things she once took for granted." Gable looked directly into my eyes. Like having a mother who loves her unconditionally, She added a sentence that made me think. She needs to respect you, not just need you. Gable had hit the core of my entire plan. In the days that followed, despite the hard work and meager pay, I noticed a new light in Claire's eyes. It wasn't the false confidence of before, but a quiet pride, the pride of someone who had earned her money through sweat and effort. She started talking about her colleagues, stories of their struggles and resilience. In particular, she mentioned a woman named Mrs. Davis, who had been doing office cleaning for over 20 years. She told me there are two types of people who do this job. Mother, Claire recounted, her face smudged with dust and weariness. One is those who never had a chance, and the other is those who ruined the chances they had. She asked me which type I was. And how did you answer? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I told her the truth. I had everything. A loving family, a stable home, a father who always looked out for me, but I destroyed it all myself for an undeserving man. Mrs. Davis had smiled and said, "Then at least you know exactly why you're here. That puts you ahead of most people." That night, when Claire sat down on the sofa next to me, weariness etched on her face, but her eyes shone brighter than ever. "Mother, I want you to know this. The past few weeks have been the hardest of my life, but also the most important." "Why, dear?" I asked gently. "Because I finally understand what truly matters. Not money, not living in the most luxurious apartment, not impressing others." She looked directly into my eyes, tears beginning to roll down. "But having people who truly love you, people who are there for you when everything falls apart." These weren't tears of self-pity as before, but tears of deep understanding, of a soul slowly awakening. My heart softened, but I remained steadfast. She was ready to face the truth about her actions, and more importantly, ready to learn. She was at the bottom of remorse, and from there, I believed she would find a way to get up and rebuild her life more meaningfully. The heavy oak door of Mr. Harrison's law office opened like a gateway to a new chapter in my life, and Claire's. I stepped in first, sensing the solemn, quiet atmosphere. "Mr. Harrison greeted us with his usual professional smile, but in his eyes was something deeper, as if he had read the entire story I hadn't yet told. Claire sat opposite me, huddled in the large leather chair. She had lost a lot of weight, her eyes deeply shadowed as if holding an entire sleepless night. Her expensive clothes were now wrinkled, faded, without the proud appearance of weeks past. I saw weariness etched on every line of her face, her hands constantly twisting together, clearly showing anxiety and fear. My mother's heart ached, but my resolve remained as firm as a rock. I told myself, "This is necessary." "Hello, Mrs. Brooks." "Miss Brooks," Mr. Harrison said, nodding to us. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for seeing us," Claire murmured in a weak voice. "However, I must warn you in advance that my financial situation is very complicated, and I'm afraid I cannot afford high legal fees." She looked at me, her eyes seemingly pleading for understanding. Mr. Harrison smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we're going to talk about, Miss Brooks." He exchanged a knowing glance with me, then turned to Claire. "But first, I'd like you to look at these documents." Mr. Harrison placed a thick folder in front of Claire. She cautiously opened it, each page of legal documents passing under her scrutinizing gaze. Initially, there was confusion, then it gradually turned to extreme surprise. Her lips moved silently, then broke into a sigh of relief, as if a 1,000-pound burden had just been lifted from her shoulders. "I don't understand," Claire exclaimed, her voice trembling. "These documents say that Marcus forged my signature, there's evidence of fraud, and I'm not responsible for the debts. Is this real?" Mr. Harrison nodded. "Yes. We've been investigating your case for the past few weeks. We found enough evidence to prove that you are a victim of identity fraud." Claire looked up at Mr. Harrison, then turned to me, her eyes wide. "But how is that possible? Who paid for this investigation? I have no money." That was the moment I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest swell with anticipation mixed with a little peace. This was when the final curtain had to be drawn back. "Claire," I called, my voice warm, slow, each word carefully weighed before being uttered. "There's something Mother needs to tell you." She looked at me, her eyes full of expectation but also tinged with skepticism. "What is it, Mother?" "Your father left me more than you know. A lot more." Claire's face went blank. "What are you talking about?" "Mr. Harrison," I motioned, Please show her the other documents. Mr. Harrison presented a second folder, even thicker than the first. Claire took it with trembling hands, reading. Her eyes scanned each line, each number, then stopped at the bold headings: property deeds, bank certificates, company shares. The words danced before her eyes. Claire's face went from pale to flushed red, then back to ashen. "Mother," she whispered, her voice barely audible. This means you own the building I lived in." "That's right," I confirmed. "And you have other assets, bank accounts, investments?" "That's right." "Does this mean that when I sold the beach house, it was your times house, and that sale was illegal?" "I've got it back already," I said softly. Claire stared at the papers, trying to process the information. She was utterly stunned, as if her entire world had just collapsed and been rebuilt before her eyes in a matter of minutes. "How long have you known all of this?" she asked, her voice hoarse, her eyes fixed on me, as if trying to see through my very soul. "Since the day you called me from the doctor's waiting room." "You knew all of this when I came back from Europe begging for help?" "Yes." "You knew you could solve all my problems when you saw me crying every night?" "Yes." A long, tense silence filled the room. Claire closed both folders, placing them on the table. She looked directly into my eyes, a deep gaze I had never seen from her before. "Why, Mother? Why did you let me suffer when you could have helped me?" This was the question I had been waiting for all these weeks. I had prepared this answer carefully. "Because you needed to learn something that you couldn't learn any other way." "What?" she asked, her voice full of anguish. "You needed to learn the value of what you lost. The value of family, of respect, of responsibility. When you abandoned me, you didn't just take my money. You took my dignity. You took my love. You took my trust." Claire began to cry, but the tears that flowed this time were different from before. No longer tears of self-pity, of fear, but tears of understanding, of deep remorse. She said nothing, just let the tears soak her face. Mr. Harrison discreetly broke the silence. "Miss Brooks, your mother has paid all legal fees to free you from Marcus' debts. She has also reclaimed all illegally sold assets. You are completely free from legal entanglements." Claire looked up at me, as if still unable to believe what she had just heard. "And the cleaning job I have?" "You can quit if you want," I said, "but I hope you won't." "Why?" "Because that job is teaching you something you never learned when everything was easy. It's teaching you the value of your own labor, the dignity of honest work, the importance of appreciating every penny you earn." Claire wiped her tears, looking at me with a gaze I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the gaze of a child needing her mother, but the gaze of an adult woman, respecting another woman. "Do you forgive me?" she asked, her voice soft. "I forgave you a long time ago, my daughter. The question is, can you forgive yourself?" "I don't know if I can. I did unforgivable things." "Everyone makes mistakes, Claire. The important thing is what we do after we realize those mistakes." Mr. Harrison left the room, leaving Claire and me alone for a few minutes. We sat in silence, processing everything that had just happened. Finally, Claire spoke again. "Mother, I want you to know this. Even if you didn't have all this money, even if you truly were a poor widow as I thought, I still would have learned the same lesson." "What lesson?" "That there is nothing more precious than having someone who loves you unconditionally. Throughout these past weeks, the only thing that kept me sane was knowing I had a home with you. That no matter how much I screwed up my life, you were still my mother. That will never change, Claire." "I know. But I also know that I can never take that love for granted again. I have to earn it every day with respect, with gratitude, with actions, not just words." We left Mr. Harrison's office with a completely new relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter bound by blood and habit. We were two adult women who had chosen each other after going through the hardest imaginable test. The office door closed, but another door had opened between my daughter and me. A door of understanding and respect, built on the foundation of stark truth and unconditional love. I looked at Claire, her face a canvas of conflicting emotions. From confusion to disbelief, then utter shock as each document confirmed the harsh truth. The truth about what Arthur had left, and also what she had so senselessly taken from me. When the question, "Why, Mother? Why did you let me suffer when you could have helped me?" finally burst out, I knew this moment had arrived. The moment I had waited for, prepared for weeks. And then, as I spoke each word, explaining that it was a lesson she couldn't learn any other way, a lesson about the value of family, of respect, of responsibility, of trust, and the dignity she had stripped from me. Tears began to stream down her face, but this time, they were different. They weren't the sickly sweet tears of despair, of the abandoned soul I had seen nightly for weeks. They weren't tears of self-pity for her own harsh fate. No, this time they were heavy tears of profound understanding. They flowed ceaselessly, tracing paths down her hollowed cheeks, carrying an ultimate pain but also a sense of liberation. I clearly saw in those red-rimmed eyes not bewilderment, but recognition. She no longer just pitied herself for losing Marcus, losing money, losing a luxurious life. Now, she grieved for losing herself, losing the true values that Arthur and I had cultivated for 45 years. Claire's shoulders shook violently. Suppressed sobs only intensified the heavy atmosphere in Mr. Harrison's room. I saw her bow her head, as if not daring to meet my gaze or the truth I had laid before her. Her tears fell not only from remorse for her cruel past actions, but also from realizing how terribly she had betrayed my trust, my sacrifice, and my unconditional love. She was seeing a mother whom she had discarded like trash, but who had still silently protected her from the dangers she had brought upon herself. In that moment, I knew Claire had finally hit rock bottom, not the bottom of material poverty, but the bottom of spiritual emptiness, and from that bottom, I hoped she would learn to rise, not through my rescue, but on her own 2 feet, with self-respect and a genuine desire to atone. This was the most valuable lesson, but also the most precious gift I could give her. A gift forged from love and suffering, from the silent plan of a mother who wanted her child to grow. I was sitting in the old armchair in the living room, curled up in the wool blanket Arthur used to use, when Claire returned from her night shift. Her steps were light, no longer hurried and burdened as they had been in the early days. My girl had decided not only to continue her office cleaning job, but also to enroll in an evening course in social work. Hearing that, I felt a warmth spread through my chest, mixed with pride and a touch of wistfulness. "Mother, I'm home," Claire's soft voice echoed from the kitchen door. She no longer demanded or complained. Instead, every word was imbued with respect and a hint of deference, as if afraid of disturbing me. I saw the shadows still under her eyes from lack of sleep, but they held a new, steadfast light. Her hands, once accustomed to flipping through fashion magazines and pressing the gas pedal of an expensive car, were now a little rougher from bleach and mops. But that was no longer a sign of defeat, but a badge of effort. She wasn't just staying at my house anymore. Every morning, when I woke up, the scent of coffee and toast lightly drifted from the kitchen. Claire, though tired after her night shift, still made an effort to prepare breakfast for both of us. She started sharing the household chores, from laundry and cooking to fixing small broken items, without me asking, without me reminding. She did it all willingly, as if atoning for her misguided months. "Mother, I think we should repaint the fence out front," Claire said one afternoon while watering plants. "It's too old. Let me look into paint prices." I looked at my daughter. My heart stirred. This wasn't the Claire I used to know, the girl who only cared about lavish trips and designer brands. This was a new Claire, a woman who had hit rock bottom and found the true value of labor, of a family home. Then one evening after dinner, as we sat together sipping hot ginger tea, Claire turned to me, her eyes full of seriousness. "Mother, I want to talk to you like an adult. I know I hurt you very much. I know I abandoned you, sold everything, but I want you to know, I don't want to live off you anymore." She took a deep breath. "I want to live here with you, but not as a freeloading daughter. I want to contribute to the family. I will pay a portion of the rent, even if it's a small amount from my job. It's my effort. I will take care of the main meals during the week. And I want you to see me as a friend, a companion, not just your daughter." Claire's words were like cool water nourishing the parched ground of my soul. Hearing her say rent, contribute, friend, I felt an invisible wall between us slowly crumble. Those words weren't just atonement, but also acknowledgement, respect. It showed that Claire had truly understood the lesson I wanted her to learn. "Claire," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "I never considered you a burden. You are always my daughter." "I know," she replied, her eyes welling up. "But I want you to be proud of me. I want you to know that I've learned to stand on my own 2 feet, that I've found my own path." And so, my house was not just where I lived, but also where my mother-daughter relationship was reborn. Claire continued her night job, then immersed herself in textbooks for social work. She brought back stories of difficult women she met, of unfortunate lives, and in her eyes, I no longer saw the arrogance of someone who had once scorned simple values. Instead, there was compassion and a desire to help. Now, every evening, we sat together in the living room, perhaps reading books, watching the news, or simply in silence. Claire no longer mentioned Marcus, no longer complained about what was lost. She spoke of future plans, of dreams to build a small home for abandoned women, of wanting to use her story to motivate others. I looked at my daughter, her hair a little longer, her figure slender but full of life. This wasn't the ending I expected when Arthur passed, but it was a more wonderful beginning than ever. Our mother-daughter relationship had been reborn, not on the bonds of blood or responsibility, but on a firm foundation of respect, understanding, and a genuine, unconditional love. I knew Arthur in heaven was also smiling. He always believed in me and in our daughter. On Sunday, Claire and I went to the beach house together. She had hesitated and refused a few times when I suggested it, saying she needed time to process everything, but today, her willingness made me feel relieved. As the old Ford, which Arthur had cherished like his own child and was now back with me, rolled down the familiar coastal road, I saw Claire silently watching the scenery pass by the window. The silence between us now was no longer heavy or suffocating as before, but a thoughtful pause, like two souls rewatching an old film together. The house appeared, small, cream-colored, with a wide porch overlooking the vast ocean. Claire didn't rush out of the car like before. She sat there for a while, her eyes squinting in the sunlight, gazing at the house where we had spent all her childhood summers. I saw something change in her eyes, no longer indifference, but a deep nostalgia, mixed with a little confusion. "It looks exactly the same, Mother, doesn't it?" she whispered, her voice slightly hoarse. "Some things don't change, my dear," I replied, looking directly at her. "But other things do." Claire nodded. "I'm not the person who sold this house anymore." We walked in, slowly, step by step. The house was still clean, tidy, just as Arthur and I had kept it all those years. Claire walked through each room, her fingers gently touching the furniture, stopping for a long time before the family photos hanging on the wall. A photo of Arthur smiling brightly with tiny Claire, a photo of us celebrating Christmas together, a photo of her radiant on her wedding day. Each photo was an invisible knife into my heart, and I knew, Claire's too. "Mother, I'm sorry," she said, her voice choked, as we stood in the living room. "You've already apologized, my dear," I said gently, placing my hand on her shoulder. "No, I want to apologize specifically for this house," she said, turning to look at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Not just for selling it, but for turning all our family memories into a commercial transaction. I've forgiven you." Claire sat down on the sofa where Arthur used to read the newspaper every Sunday morning. "Do you know what hurts me most?" "What is it, my dear?" "It's that when I sold it, I didn't feel anything at all. It was just another asset. Now, being back here, I can feel Dad in every corner. I can hear him laugh, smell his morning coffee, see his reading glasses on the table." She sighed. "Dad is here, Mother. Has always been here." A warmth spread through my chest. "Arthur, my love, she finally felt you. This atonement was not for me, but for herself, and for his memory. Dad is always here, Claire, has always here, and he would be very proud of how you've overcome everything," I thought to myself. We spent the whole day there, cooking, cleaning, fixing small details together. It wasn't just about cleaning a house, but a ritual of healing, reconnecting not only with this physical space, but also with the values it represented. Every brushstroke, every whispered word, every small laugh was part of a rebuilding, constructing trust and love little by little. As the sun began to set, we sat on the porch Arthur had built with his own hands, gazing at the vast ocean, dyed in orange and purple hues. The salty sea breeze caressed our hair, carrying the scent of freedom and new beginnings. "Mother, I have a proposal," Claire said, breaking the peaceful silence. I looked at her, my heart filled with anticipation. "What is it, my dear?" "I want us to turn this house into a temporary shelter for women escaping domestic violence," she said, looking out at the sea. "A place where they can stay while rebuilding their lives." My chest tightened. That proposal, perfect. Not just kind, not just compassionate, but a precise reflection of Arthur's soul. It was the ultimate symbol of Claire's growth and compassion, proof that she truly understood the value of family, of sharing, and of love. I took a deep breath, feeling tears welling up. "I think that's a wonderful idea, my dear," I said, my voice trembling. "We can use some of the fund's resources to maintain it, and you can oversee the program through your work." Claire turned to look at me, her eyes full of hope. "Are you sure, Mother? Turning our family sanctuary into that?" "The best sanctuaries are those that are shared, my dear," I said, recalling Arthur's words. "Your father always said that a house isn't truly a home until it opens its doors to others who need love." He was right. Arthur was always generous with our home, always ready to welcome relatives, friends, and neighbors who needed a place to stay. And now, his own daughter was continuing that legacy. That evening, we returned home with a new project and a completely renewed relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter bound by obligation or need. We were two adult women who had consciously chosen to build a life together based on love, respect, and a common purpose. Before falling asleep, I quietly spoke to Arthur in my mind. "We did it, my love. Our daughter finally understood what truly matters." And for the first time since his passing, I felt him reply, "I always knew you would. Both of you are stronger than you think." Justice had arrived, not in the form of revenge, but as a lesson, not as punishment, but as transformation. And in the end, both of us had gained something far more precious than money. We had gained a genuine relationship, built on a solid foundation that no future crisis could destroy.